everybody, it's Rosemary here. Today I am mostly talking to the teenagers and young adults out there who are living with a parent or someone else who is suffering from hoarding disorder. The very first video I made, which was called Insecurity in Children of Hoarders, like that video of all the videos I've made is like got the most views. Last week I got a comment from a 15-year-old who's living with a mother who's a hoarder and having a hard time. I was thinking a lot about her and her situation, and I thought today I would make a video really aimed at young people who are still stuck in this the way I once was. Well, I'll share with you, mostly from my own experiences, ways that I got through it, ways that I found to cope with it, and ways that I tried and sometimes succeeded in getting, or one time succeeded in getting out of it and escaping. But I would encourage you to brainstorm and think of other things that would be possible for you in your situation. I guess I'm going to divide this into coping strategies and escape strategies. Not every hoarded house is exactly the same. The gross things may be different gross things. You know, in my case, we moved around a lot, and you know, there were some houses that had thousands of cockroaches. There was one apartment that had like God only knows how many mice in it, lots. There were houses where we had like 15 cats that shat all over the place and had no usable litter box, and the shit was just everywhere, and they would pee on my clothes. Maybe you're dealing with a house that's like about to fall apart or something, you know, like maybe you're dealing with mold. There's different gross things that you deal with when you live in a hoarded house, and I've been there, and you guys are there right now, the people I have in mind for this video that I'm mainly talking to. If you don't have a way out currently, if you're stuck in it, how do you deal with it? In one house that I lived in, there were numerous cockroaches, and they would like invade everything. So in that house, I didn't have a bedroom to sleep in. I had to sleep on the couch, and the couch was part of the common hoarded space. When I would wake up in the morning, I would find like cockroaches that had, you know, drowned to death or whatever in my saliva. I would find like a cockroach in my mouth, in my ear. You know, one time I even went to the bathroom like the next day and found one like in my vulva. So cockroaches would like get inside my body while I was asleep. Obviously, if I'm awake, I feel them, I can like get them off of me, right? But if I'm asleep, I don't really have much recourse. I didn't have a safe place to sleep that was separate from where the cockroaches were. So what I did is when I went to sleep, I put cotton balls in my ears. I started sleeping like fully clothed, like in jeans and, you know, shirt, like, you know, because I thought they won't be able to get inside the jeans so easily, right? And you know, there's a limit to how much you can do, you know, because you can't close your mouth. So you know, sometimes I would try to sleep with the covers over me, and actually in some cultures they do that, but I mean, I find I want air, I want oxygen, I don't want to be rebreathing this carbon dioxide trapped under the blanket, so there are limits to what you can do. And in that house, there were tons and tons of cockroaches, and multiple occasions it happened that I went to school the next day, and I would be in some class in middle school, and then a cockroach would crawl out of my notebook right there on my desk in front of everyone, and that would be really embarrassing to me. And so then every morning I would like shake my notebooks out before leaving for school, but it's still, they would find hiding places. So now I'm kind of thinking back, like, what else could I have maybe done? And I think one thing I could have done maybe is to get like a plastic bag and put that binder that they always hid in. Maybe I could have put that binder in a plastic bag, like as soon as I come home, and leave it in the plastic bag, sealed up, until the next morning when I left. Maybe that could have helped. Also, we tended to have a lot of cats, as many hoarders do. The cats just went to the bathroom all over the house. My clothes would smell. It's like hard to keep your body and your clothes and things that go with you out into the outside world. It's hard to keep those things from getting contaminated. And then if you're at school and the other kids notice that you smell, I mean, that's horrible, right? Because this is like the time in your life that you're like trying to form an identity and you're trying to make friends and socialize. And if you are then carrying this stigma that puts people off and makes them judge you even, I mean, it's very hurtful because it harms your sense of self-worth. So what can you do? Maybe, I did not find the solution to this, but maybe one thing you could do is, again, with the plastic bags, like maybe if I had had a way of keeping clothes in like plastic bags, maybe cats couldn't pee on the clothes. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, like if you are currently stuck in a hoarded home and you haven't found your way out yet, and right now you have to get through this time in your life to get to the better time that is coming, you gotta just kind of brainstorm and see what little things you can do to make it that little bit much better for you. What little things can you do, concrete things, to reduce your suffering? So if your clothes smell like cat piss, is there a way that you could keep them not smelling like cat piss? Like, if it's that they're in a pile and cats pee on them, maybe you could keep them someplace where the cats can't pee on them. Or maybe you could, if it's that they absorb the scent from everywhere in the house, maybe you could keep them like in plastic bags. Not every situation is the same, so I'll bet you that some of you have your own room in this hoarded household and others of you don't. The people who have their own room, you're in a better situation. You can't completely protect yourself from the house. Like, cockroaches could still crawl in under the door, right? Smells can still come in, right? But you could try and keep your room like a space just for you that maybe other people don't even come into. And you could try and just at least have control over that room. You could clean that room. You could keep that room really clean and try to keep it as much removed from the rest of the situation as possible. Like I said, I lived in many different houses with my family. They all ended up being hoarded at some point. And in one house, it was the first time I was going to have my own room. I was really excited. And that room was like the cleanest, the only clean room really in the house. And it was a sanctuary for me. But like in another place, I had to share a room with my sister, and I felt like it wasn't really my space. And that room would end up getting really messy because I just figured, well, like, what's the point? I don't have control over it. I can't keep the whole room clean because I don't have control of the whole room. And I would let it go more. But we kind of ended up dividing it, so at least I had part of my own space. And here's another thing I want to say. If you have your own room, but it's messy and it looks hoarded like the rest of the house, don't feel like that means you're a hoarder. Don't think that that means you are going to live the rest of your life like this. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that, number one, a lot of teenagers have messy rooms anyway. people who live in, clean houses. But additionally to that, it means that you're living in total chaos. There's no way you can like bring friends home into this house, and you're not getting to like enjoy the kind of home that other kids are getting to enjoy. And it's depressing. It is depressing to live in a hoarded house. And sometimes you might get depressed and you might just kind of feel like giving up. And you might feel like, well, what's the point? What's the point of having a clean room if the rest of the house is a disaster? Probably if I have a clean room, my parents just going to start keeping stuff in here too. Or, even if I have a clean room, I still can't have friends over. Or even if I have a clean room, like probably I'm still going to have to deal with like smells and cockroaches and all that kind of stuff because it's in the house. It's understandable if you feel that way. If you get down and you just kind of let it go and it starts looking like the rest of the house, it's understandable. And there were times that my room was like that too. And, when I was young, when I was your age, I would think about what will it be like someday when I'm a grown up and I live on my own. I thought, like when you have some childhood trauma, you either grow up to repeat it or you go completely against it. I had this very black and white thinking, and a lot of young people have black and white thinking. A lot of adults have black and white thinking too, for that matter. But black and white thinking is not accurate. The reality is more complex than that. And so I kind of thought, probably either if I grow up this way, either I'm going to be an adult who lives exactly like this, or I'm going to be a super neat freak who has everything completely organized in my world, and I'll go to the opposite extreme. So I thought those were the two options. And so then for a long time, if my space got messy, I thought, oh no, I'm turning into my mother. Oh no, I am turning into a hoarder, all of that. But guess what? It's not like that. I mean, okay, right now my room is perfectly clean, as you can see, the little piece of it that you can see. But I will tell you that I spent half of my Saturday yesterday just going through a pile of crap I had like let accumulate on the floor. Papers, money, books, notebooks, receipts, credit cards, random objects, and like there was a lot of stuff in one corner on the floor. And I put laundry away, I put that stuff away, and it took me hours and hours and hours. And that pile of stuff had been on the floor for a couple weeks. And, sometimes I get my room really nice like this, and then sometimes I'll go a few days where there's a couple outfits that are just thrown someplace instead of put away. But then eventually I do put it away. So I'm not living a hoarded lifestyle, and I'm also not living like a perfect lifestyle either. And, there are times when, as an adult, I've really, it's a continuum, it's a continuum. And your goal is to live in a way that makes you happy and keeps you safe, and any children you may have in the future. You don't have to have a different kind of OCD. It's okay to be a little bit messy. It doesn't mean that you're a hoarder. It doesn't mean that you're going to grow up to be a hoarder like your parent. That's also possible because we've learned a lot of habits from them. We've learned a lot of kind of distorted thinking from them too. We've maybe acquired anxieties from them, but you are not condemned to live the same way that your hoarding parent lives right now. So if your room is messy, don't think it spells the end for you. It doesn't. But if you do have your own space, look at it as like the one thing you have for yourself. And if it's possible to defend that space and take care of that space, that'll be a good thing for you. If you don't have your own space, then it's a little trickier. What could you do if you don't have your own space to sleep in the house? the hoarded house. You could look for the best place in the house for you. So there was a time when there were all these mice, and actually at that time I did have a bed and I was sleeping on the bed, but there were mice in the bedroom and everywhere in the house. And every night when I went to sleep, they would get more active in the dark, right? And so if I would turn the light off, they would get really active, and I would hear them and I could see them in the shadows. And they would be like maybe inside my mattress or box springs or on the underside. I would feel the vibrations of them like running around. And like right next to my bed, there was a small window and it had blinds. And I remember seeing them crawling up and down that string for the blinds. And that was, inches from my face, right? And I'm supposed to fall asleep in all this. And I would just hope to fall asleep soon so that I wouldn't have to be awakened in fear. But I was afraid. I was afraid every night. It was terrifying. And then I would think, well, maybe I could sleep with the lights on, but cover my eyes somehow. Maybe they'll not come at me as much if they're not in the dark, because they're nocturnal. So maybe when there's bright light, maybe they avoid it. Yeah, so there's a strategy I found, leaving the lights on. But one night, the thing I had been most afraid of did happen. And when I was trying to fall asleep and I was still awake, one just ran over my face. And I had enough. I was like, that was a breaking point for me. And so I just was desperate to get out of that situation any way that I could. And we had a balcony in this apartment, like an outdoor balcony. And so I said, that is the one place that they're not going to get, because the mice are on the inside of the house and that's outdoors. So I said, okay, I am going to sleep on the balcony, because in the balcony I am going to be safe from these mice. So, but it was cold out there. It even like rained a little bit that night. So what I did is I just went around and I got anything that I thought I would need or that I could use. So I got like sofa cushions and I lined them up to make like a mattress for myself. I got every blanket and winter coat and raincoat that I could find to like pile up to make it warm enough for me. So, even if you have like a sleeping bag or something, that could come in good. If you don't, you could pile up warm things. Maybe you could put a waterproof thing on top. It could be a plastic bag. It could be a raincoat, whatever, right? And I made my own little makeshift outdoor sleeping space. And there was like a sliding glass door, and I closed that sliding glass door, and I could see the mice even like pressing up against the glass, but they couldn't get outside, and I felt safe. I really felt safe. And you know what? That was a really good feeling to be out there, because I had done something independent to take care of myself. And that's what you need. You need moments like that where you realize that even though overall you don't have a lot of power, that there are pieces of power you can claim for yourself, that you can take charge and find a way to protect yourself. And even if it's just a small thing, like I hadn't escaped from the house, but I had escaped from that room. And I had escaped from the mice. That felt really good, because it felt like I was capable. I was capable of taking care of myself. And that is a feeling that's carried me through the rest of my life. So, yeah. Little things. Look for the little things that you can do that can make you feel better. If you don't have a working bathroom at home, think about where else in the world can you find those things. Can you take a shower at school in the locker room? Are there public toilets near your house? What are the possibilities for you? What can you do right now so that you can be clean? What can you do right now so that your clothes smell clean? What can you do to protect your body from mice and cockroaches and other kinds of, insects, vermin, fungi, whatever? What can you do to take care of yourself given the possibilities? And, I hated being a kid and being a teenager. The whole time I was just waiting to grow up, and I could not wait to grow up, because here's the sad truth, is that when you're a kid, you do not have as much power as the adults have. The adults are in control, and because of that, you have to put up with stuff that is not your fault. It's not. And I just could not wait to escape from that and be in charge of my own life. And guess what? I did grow up, and it is totally awesome. It is wonderful to be an adult. I love being an adult. I wouldn't go back to being a kid for anything. You know, there's other people the opposite way. They're looking back at their happy childhoods and they're thinking, oh, I can't cope with these stresses of adult life. But maybe for you, like me, the best time in your life is in adulthood. So you have something to look forward to. But I know that's small consolation if there's mice running over your face at night. Here is another point to make. It is not your job to fix the situation. It's not your job to cure your parent. It is not your job to clean the whole house. It probably isn't possible to clean the whole house. Even if you did clean the whole house, like single-handedly, you, teenage person, all by yourself, it's probably too much work for one person. And even if you do, if you have a hoarder that you're living with, probably they're very quickly going to hoard it all up all over again. And so if you try to fix the situation all on your own, it's probably going to be pretty frustrating. I mean, if you want to try, you can try, see how far you can get with that. You look at it as an experiment, a scientific experiment. You're going to try and see if you can do it. And if you find out that you can't, or that you can only get so far, then that's data, that's information, that's something you've learned from the experiment. You've learned how much is possible to do on your own. Or if you succeed in doing it, and then you see how long it takes for it to get hoarded again, or what are the issues that come up if you're trying to keep it clean and the other person is throwing stuff everywhere. Look at that as information too. You're finding out what happens. What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? So if you want to do that, you can. But even adults who have hoarding parents and try and go in and clean up those houses, over and over again, they write about frustration because it's kind of a losing battle. And if you have a parent who is a hoarder, they are suffering from an anxiety disorder. Okay, what is anxiety? Anxiety is this feeling that we all get from time to time where maybe you feel kind of tight in your chest, and you feel sort of like you're dreading something bad that you think is going to happen. You're worried about it, and you might feel panicky, like how can you avoid this bad thing that's going to happen? So notice that your parent or whoever it is who's the hoarder, they might frequently kind of overreact to things and think it's the end of the world and think something horrible is going to happen. That's anxiety. And that is something that they need help from a psychologist. And you're not a psychologist, you're a kid. It is not your job to fix them, and they have to want to get better on their own, or no other person can help them. Really, they have to really want to make a change for themselves, or it's not going to work. No psychologist, no family member, nobody can make them change. They're the only ones who can decide to accept help. So it's not your job, and you're probably not going to be able to succeed in changing your parent, the household. If you're stuck in it for now, I would recommend looking for just small ways to make your own life easier. Okay, then the other thing is about getting out. So probably a little kid really wouldn't even have a clue how to get out of it. But if you're a teenager, let's say, or a young adult of some kind, it's starting to be possible, or it's almost possible for you to get out of this. There are different ways that you could escape. Some might work, some might not work. Some are worth it, some are not worth it. So for example, if you think I am suffering so bad, maybe I should just run away. If you don't have a plan of where you're going to go and you don't have a support system that you can really rely on, and if you're not old enough to like make your own money yet, this is a dangerous plan, because as bad as things are right now, and if they're anything like the way they were for me, I understand they are bad. It would be worse to like be a homeless person on the street in a downward spiral that could make your life get worse and worse and worse. It would be worse to just end up sleeping on the street, meet other people who are on the street, who have their own problems, maybe get involved in a community that is like addicted to heroin or something, or surviving through prostitution, or, don't end up on the street. I think it's better to be in the hoarded house with your family than on the street. So don't just run away without a plan, a firm plan. Don't do that. Use your time to make a plan. And even if you feel out of control because you're stuck in this chaotic world, and there's this guy who was called Michel Foucault, a French guy. And he kind of wrote a book about like the history of like prisons and stuff. And what was it called? Vigilar y Castigar is the name in Spanish, but it was written in French, but I had an ex-boyfriend who gave it to me in Spanish. I'm not sure what's the title in French or English. It's like, what is it? Observation and punishment, or vigilance and punishment, or surveillance and punishment, or I don't know. Anyway, Foucault, Foucault, Michel Foucault. Okay, so he was talking about how governments control people, and the ways that, they control people through making laws, right? And punishing them if they break the laws. And what are the ways that governments have punished people over time? And what is incarceration really all about? And he concluded that physically we're not really free. The government is controlling us. But he concluded that the one place that you can still be free is in your mind. That you should claim that freedom for yourself. The freedom to think of whatever you want to think of and about and how you want to think. I don't know, maybe other people would argue with that, but okay, think about that idea. Even if you're trapped in this hoarded household, you are free up here, and you're free to think about what you want to think about. And in your private mental world, you can start making a plan. And that is just like going out and sleeping on the balcony. That is a way of taking some power for yourself. Because even right now that you're stuck in this horrible situation, you can start to do something to help yourself get out of this. And that is planning. Okay, so how can you get out? Some of you may have a friend or a relative who is not a hoarder, who would be willing to let you come and live with them. That would be the best case scenario, but probably many of you don't have that option. Now, in my case, in my family, it wasn't discussed that my mother had this problem. It was not acknowledged. It was as if no one knew. I don't really know if anyone knew or not. I didn't feel like that's something I could talk to my grandparents about, or my aunt and uncles, at least early on. And for whatever reason, I just didn't believe that they would take me in. And also, like, I lived in Kansas City, which is like a city that's on the border between two states. And my relatives lived in the other state, which was Missouri. And I wanted to keep going to my school. So I didn't want to take the risk of like losing my high school by moving to another state. So I didn't really see my relatives as an option at that time. At one point I did talk to a friend about it, and I actually even asked her if I could go and live with her mother. She had actually already gone off to college, but I don't know where I got the boldness from, but I just asked if her mother would take me in. I kind of had started fighting with my mother when I was a teenager, and I had started to realize that this was really a problem that I could blame her for, the hoarding. And then I thought, well, if I'm always complaining about it, I'm a hypocrite if I don't try to get out of it. If it's really so bad as I say, I should be trying to escape. And I put all this pressure on myself where I had to escape from it, or else I wasn't really being mistreated. Anyway, so I kind of said, okay, well then I should be desperate to get out of this, so I should ask the first person I think could take me in. So I asked this friend, and I made this plan. I actually went over, her mom said yes. I went over to this house that I didn't know. I, spent a weekend, a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon, with my friend, kind of cleaning up this extra room that they had. That was going to be my room. And I even had snuck a photo of my grandparents over there. So I put it on the nightstand, and I had taken my history book from school, and I was starting to have my stuff over there. And then I went to school, and the social worker kind of called me down, and my friend's mom had called her. And she said, my friend's mom was worried that maybe my mom could say she was trying to steal her daughter or make a stink about it. And I guess the friend's mom had said that she still was willing to have me live with her, but that my mom needed to give permission. There's no way my mom ever would have given permission for me to leave. So that idea went down in flames, and I felt so embarrassed for having asked. I felt humiliated, and I was too embarrassed to go back and get this picture of my grandparents or my history book. So then I ended up having to go through the rest of the school year without my history book. I would have to try and borrow somebody else's history book during the day to do the homework or the reading, and then I never saw that picture of my grandparents again until recently. I went on a trip to Kansas City, and I had now through Facebook made contact with that friend again. And it turned out they still had my grandparents' picture after all these years. So I went back and got it, and then I gave it to my sister. So, oh my God. I was really embarrassed. And I felt like the whole thing was a failure. But in another way, I was relieved because I had been getting really anxious about, can I really do this? Can I really escape? And how am I going to live over there? It's not like my family. I shouldn't be mooching off of them. I should be supporting myself. I did have a job at that point. I was more than 16 years old. I was working at a fast food place. So I did have some money. So I thought, okay, I should be paying for my own food and groceries and stuff, but I didn't have a car, and they lived way out in the boondocks. I didn't even know how to get to school or anything, and I just thought, how the hell am I gonna make this work? I don't know when do the buses run, and if I don't have a parent to pick me up, how am I gonna do it? And I was getting anxious about the whole thing, but it didn't materialize. You can try something like that. But there are pitfalls. It could be that your parents put up an obstacle to you moving out. It could be that the other people aren't really willing to take you in. It could be that other people will help you, but only to a certain extent, and then you have to be able to do certain things for yourself, and you may or may not be ready to do those things for yourself. Okay, so that's one option. If that's not an option, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. It does mean that for now, maybe you're stuck, but you're not stuck forever. Another option is foster care, group homes, all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, in my case, when I was 15, I kind of went to war with my mom. And it was over a guy. So I I really had bad self-esteem problems because of living this way. I felt bad about myself. And I got involved with a guy sexually. It was the first guy I ever had sex with. I started having sex when I was 15, like 15 and a half. Okay, now, right now I'm 45, right? So I've lived a lot of life. I could give you my perspective now looking back on what was going on. Okay, this guy, he really was not a good guy. And he was not treating me the way I deserved to be treated. He really was mistreating me. He was using me for sex. He was using me for money. He was into drugs. He had some substance issues, and I had all these self-esteem problems, and I thought that if someone was willing to have sex with you, that it was kind of like a vote in your favor. Like it was kind of like, oh, if someone's willing to have sex with me, maybe I'm not so disgusting after all. Like, oh, if this guy wants to have sex with me, maybe I'm not so disgusting as I think I am. You know, like I've been growing up, having all these experiences of like finding cockroaches in my body, having people say that my clothes smell like cat urine, you know, having cockroaches crawl out of my notebook at school. All those things made me feel like I was a disgusting person. Like there was just something innate about me. Like I was contaminated from my living conditions and that there was nothing I could do about it. And the idea that someone would be like I thought of myself as disgusting. Okay, and if you're feeling that way, let me tell you right now, you're wrong. You're not disgusting. The conditions that you're living in are disgusting, and it's not your fault. And you're not going to be in this situation forever. But, you know, I kind of craved attention from someone who would make me feel better, who would make me feel like maybe I wasn't so disgusting after all. And so when I got involved in a sexual relationship with this guy, in my mind, it was like my path to self-esteem, right? It was like what was going to make me feel like I wasn't disgusting and I, you know, could get affection and approval that way. But from the guy's perspective, in this case, he was someone who just saw me as easy prey and he was out to use me. So, like, he could get sex easily from me. When you start having sex with someone, there are biological things that happen hormonally in your body. So when you have sex with someone, your brain releases this chemical called oxytocin. And it's the same chemical that women's brains produce when they give birth. And it kind of is part of the process of falling in love with your child, right? So when you have sex with someone, especially if it's more than one time, you start to have feelings for this person. You start to bond with them. You start to crave to be around them. It's probably like some kind of evolutionary thing to like encourage people, sexual partners, to stay together and raise kids together so that kids will have more than one parent. It's probably something like that. But it's something that is hard to avoid. So if you start having sex with someone, you will probably start to have intense feelings for them. And especially if you're a teenager and you're experiencing these things for the first time, everything's more intense. So of course I fell totally in love with this guy, and he was like my drug. I was like addicted to him. I would have done anything for him. And I did. So, you know, I was there working hard for my money at a fast food restaurant, but I would give him money if he asked me for money. He was into drugs. I really had never wanted to do drugs because the only thing I thought I had going for me was my brain, and I didn't want to mess up my brain with drugs. But he was into drugs, so I was like, okay, well, I'll do drugs too so that I can be involved in something that he's interested in and hang out with him. And then I would end up paying for the drugs because I was the only one working for a living and having money. And he he never like acknowledged me as his girlfriend or anything like that. Actually, he usually had one or sometimes even two official girlfriends that, he would show to the world as this is my girlfriend or whatever. And I was supposed to like be this other woman in the shadows. And I just accepted that because I thought, well, of course, why would he want anyone to know that he's sleeping with me because I'm so disgusting, right? I'm lucky that he'll sleep with me at all. I shouldn't get uppity and expect him to acknowledge it. Okay, can you guys see that this guy was not treating me well? He wasn't. I deserved to be acknowledged by whoever wanted to go out with me. And I deserved to be more than just somebody's, easy sex and drug connection. So really, he was getting a lot out of me. And what was I getting out of it? I was getting out of it, I thought I was getting some self-esteem by believing that it was possible for somebody to like not be disgusted by me. But in reality, I was kind of just reinforcing the idea in my own head that I was disgusting because he was treating me this way. It must be because I'm disgusting. That's what I thought. Okay, anyway, I was with this guy who was not treating me well. And we did all kinds of dangerous things. So luckily, I survived. I was not killed in any of these things that happened when I was with him. There were car accidents from driving under the influence that I was involved in and things like that. But luckily, here I am, safe to tell the tale. So, okay, my mom loved me. And she had a sixth sense about this guy that he was bad news. And she found out that I was sleeping with him because she read my diary, which was an invasion of my privacy. Be careful with that, teenagers. I know it's a healthy, wonderful thing to be able to keep a diary, but it also creates evidence for the adults who want to control you. And maybe you think that they wouldn't, but maybe they would. Read your diary. So I don't know, maybe these days keep it on a computer with a password, encrypt it. Maybe keep it somewhere where they can't find it on the internet. Keep it, I don't know where you can keep it, but keep it well hidden or up here. Or write it in another language you're learning at school that they can't understand. So she loved me. She could tell that this guy was bad news. And obviously, since she was a hoarder, she had an anxiety disorder, right? So if you're a person with an anxiety disorder, you're likely to just panic and desperately want to stop the bad thing from happening, which for her in this case was, her daughter getting involved with this guy who's trouble, right? And so instead of kind of calmly being able to change the situation in a positive way, she just wanted to put me on lockdown. You're not allowed to go anywhere. You're not allowed to see him, especially blah, 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 blah. But I had all these raging hormones because I'd been having sex with him. So my body had like made me in love with him. He was my drug that I was addicted to, and I would have done anything to be with him, anything. So then I started sneaking around as much as I could. I started fighting with her a lot, yelling at each other, insulting each other. She called me a slut one time. I remember that very clearly. And I started to realize, oh, this hoarding problem, we didn't have the word hoarding back then, but it was hoarding. This is actually her fault, now that I think about it, because before I always made excuses for her. I said, oh, my poor mom, she's a single mom, she can't cope with everything on her plate, poor her. But now that she was like trying to keep me from the one thing I wanted in life, which was to be with this guy whenever he was available, like now it's like I was at war with her, and I was willing to point out any error on her part. And I was even willing to like use it as ammunition against her. So then I started thinking, she's always been afraid of these health department inspectors coming around. And she's always been telling us, like, they're going to put you in foster care if we can't clean this house up before the inspectors come. And we were always terrified of going into foster care. And I started thinking, well, is foster care really worse than this? Maybe if the government wants to put us in foster care, maybe it's for a reason. Maybe it's because we're actually in danger here. But the reality is I was still terrified of going into foster care. I had a friend who had been in the foster system a long time, and she actually ended up being like adopted by this family who then the father like molested her some more and abused her. And you know, not all the families in the foster care system are good families. And the thing is, again, you're a kid, you don't have the power, right? The adults have the power. And so I was afraid because there was no way for me to predict if I would end up with a good family or a bad family. And if the situation that I would end up in, if I went into the foster system, whether it would be a better situation or a worse situation, or a situation that was equally bad but in a totally different way. So I would actually rather stay with, in my case, I chose to stay with like the evil you know versus the evil you don't know. So, but I kind of for a while was playing chicken with my mom over this thing, because it was like, I was 15 when I started having sex with this guy, and he was 18. And she said, oh, well, that's against the law. That's statutory rape. I can have him arrested for statutory rape if he sees you again. If you keep seeing him, I'm going to have him arrested. And to me, this was almost like making a life or death threat. So then I went back at her. I'm like, oh, well, if you have him arrested, I'm going to report you, and I'm going to have the inspectors come right now, and then they're going to take your kids away from you. And you've already lost me, but you still have another one here, and she'll get put into foster care. But the reality is I didn't want to do that to my sister either. So it was kind of like, who's going to call whose bluff first? So in the end, I did not report her because I was afraid for myself and my sister what might happen to us if we went into foster care. So you can think about this for yourself, and you could also talk to maybe a school counselor or an adult that you trust, a teacher you trust, a favorite aunt or uncle, and just see what they think. Like maybe if they know something about the system and how it works, and if you tell them about what is your situation actually like, maybe you guys can decide together whether it's worth taking that step or not taking that step. Okay, so lastly, for me, what ended up happening is that I waited till I was 18. I actually waited till I graduated high school, and 2 weeks later, I was out of there. I went to follow that guy. He lived in California, but it wasn't just going to see him. I was also going to go to a college out there in California. And look, for many of you, college could be the way to escape. You know, do not go to a college in your own city and keep living at home. Get out of there. Find a way. In this case, even if it means taking on student loan debt, it's worth it because you need to get out of there. And going off to college is a totally socially acceptable way of getting out of your house. Or if you don't want to go to college, then fine, but get a job and move out. Get an apartment, get roommates, whatever you need to do. So my advice is, if you have a trusted family friend, relative, other friend, and it's possible for you to escape now and go and live in a better situation, if you have another family that's willing to take you in, and you have seen enough of that situation to think this would be better for you, then do it. If you don't, if you are stuck, then my advice to you is to take the small measures you can every day to protect yourself as much as you can. You know, creating your own space or protecting your objects from the living conditions, the smells, the liquids, the trash. Protecting yourself however you can. And start using the freedom you have inside your brain to plan how you're going to do this. And don't get panicky about it, because if you're living with a hoarder, you're probably affected to at least to some extent by their anxious thinking. You know, if they're always panicking and thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do it? I won't be able to, maybe some of that rubs off on us, right? It's contagious how you think and talk. So you might, if you're, 15, 16, 17, you've never been out living independently before. You haven't done that before. You don't know how to do it. So the thought of living independently, it's natural that that would cause you anxiety. It's natural that that would make you afraid, like, how am I going to do it? What if I fail? What if I end up on the street? What if? Anytime you find yourself asking a what if question, that is a sign to you that you're getting anxious, that anxiety is taking over. So when you hear yourself say, well, what if this? Stop yourself and say, okay, let me take a few deep breaths and calm down a little and say, okay, what are the possibilities, and try and think rationally. So right now, you do not have to have a plan overnight. You do not have to be able to get out tomorrow. You can take your time. You have permission to take your time and figure everything out. And there's details to figure out those details. Okay, how are you going to eat and make money and live? Think about it. What kind of a job could you get? And when can you get a job? In your state, at what age are you allowed to work? Are you going to need a car? Do you live in a place where there's good public transport, or will you need a car to get around? And you could start thinking about, okay, would I rent an apartment? Maybe if I'm 18, I could have friends that would want to be my roommates. Maybe, think about it. How does college work? How does student loans work? How does getting an apartment work? All these things you can explore and investigate and figure out right now. You can Google these things. You can read about them on the internet. You can talk to people who know more because they've already had some experience with it. You can ask an adult, how does it work when you want to get an apartment? What do you have to give them? What do you have to show in order to get an apartment or a car? And, how does it work to get a student loan? How do you apply for a student loan if you want to go to college? Think about what's your escape going to be like, and how are you going to get out of it? And then you get out of it and you're free. And it's not always going to be easy, and you're not going to be like an adult who's not affected by this because you've survived this. You've survived something that's very traumatic, and sometimes you are going to have feelings coming up that you're going to have to deal with it. It's not a perfect world, but guess what? It's a whole lot better than what you've been living in. And you are going to get out, and you are going to have a better life. So right now, use this freedom to make a plan to make your life better, because you can do it. Step by step, baby steps. You don't have to figure it all out overnight, but start thinking. Start small and develop your plan of how you're going to get out. Whether it's college, whether it's a friend's house, whether it's a relative, whether it's a job in an apartment, figure out when you're going to be able to get out, how you're going to be able to get out, and do it in the way that you can and that you want to. This is your life, and the rest of your life is going to be better. Okay, so good luck. Good luck with all of that. I wish you well, and you can do it, and your life is going to be a lot better. Okay, hang in there. See you later. Bye.